Good morning, my name's Martin. Welcome to Bennett's BikeSocial and welcome to the launch of the all-new Kawasaki Eliminator 500. The Eliminator is out there. It can't be bargained with, it can't be reasoned with, it doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it absolutely will not stop, ever. Welcome to the launch of Kawasaki's Eliminator, a name that I can't hear or read or think about without imagining a certain time-travelling cyborg assassin from the 1980s. Although it turns out that the Eliminator and the Terminator have that in common. They are both products of the 1980s. Kawasaki's original Eliminator was, of all things, a long, low, drag race style hot rod, I guess, powered by, as mad as it sounds, a Kawasaki GPZ 900 inline 4. I mean, that's pretty bonkers. But that's also where the Eliminator name came from. It's a drag race terminology, apparently. So when two bikes are doing a head-to-head competition, the winner stays on and the loser is, well, you guessed it, eliminated. So I guess by equipping their drag racer with the engine for the fastest superbike on the planet, that probably did a lot of eliminating. So what we don't have here is a modern equivalent of that. What we don't have is a bike powered by, say, a ZX-10 engine or the supercharged H2 engine. Instead, this modern 2024 Eliminator comes at the much more affordable, accessible, easygoing, relaxed end of Kawasaki's range. It's part of a trifecta of new 500 Kawasaki. So there's the fully faired Ninja 500, there's also the naked Z 500, and there's the Eliminator 500. Now all three are powered by the exact same 451cc parallel twin. Yeah, so there's an awful lot of rounding up there from 451 to 500. And that engine has come from, well, it's an evolved version of the Ninja 400 parallel twin. They found the extra capacity by adding stroke, so that's the distance the piston travels, rather than bore, the size of the piston. Now typically that adds more bottom end torque than top end power, which is ideal really, because the Ninja 400 engine was already tickling the top of the power limit for A2. And so you don't really need any more power, you might as well fill in the bottom end and the mid-range. So the 500 engine in all three bikes, the Eliminator, Ninja and Z, now makes 45 horsepower, so just underneath that 47 threshold for A2, which means it's completely A2 compliant out of the box, and you don't have to think about any restrictors or ECU changes or anything like that. The engine itself is pretty viceless really. It's very soft and well mannered and very refined. It's running a 180 degree crank, so it's the classic Japanese parallel twin, none of this newfangled 270 degree business here. Now that's not my favourite firing interval for a parallel twin. I think it's not overwhelming with character and explosive dynamic performance, but for its intended use it's very like I say, very soft and very friendly, very docile, very well mannered. There's kind of no big woofing chugs of combustion, it's all little pitter-patter of pistons, polite pistons, there we go. And that feeds into everything else about the powertrain. The throttle response is really smooth, even though there's no ride-by-wire throttle. The clutch is super light thanks to a slip and assist function. The gearbox changes really slickly, 6-speed box, just in case you were thinking they were going proper old school with it. So the engine sits in an all-new chassis, which is very long, very low and very light. It's 1520 millimeters of wheelbase, which is about 5 foot long between the wheels. How low? Well, the seat height is 735 millimeters as standard, so about 29 inches I think. And if you want to go lower you can, there's an optional low seat that will take that down to 715 millimeters or 28 inches, which really is scraping your bum on the ground kind of stuff. If you want to go slightly higher for a little bit more legroom, There's a higher seat which will take it up to Check's brain 765mm, I think. So that must be about 30 inches, something like that. So I'm 5'9" and I'm on the standard seat, and I do feel a little bit scrunched up, but I guess that is a consequence of having that low seat, which is, you know, in drag race terms it would be all about having your centre of weight down low and getting a good quarter mile time. Nowadays it's much more about giving riders confidence, so especially new riders or smaller riders or less experienced riders, less confident riders, having a low seat height helps you put both feet flat on the floor, and this is definitely the bike for doing that. In fact, Kawasaki say this is the lowest sub 500cc bike in their range, I think. And how light, that's the other thing. It also helps with confidence. It's no good having a low bike if it weighs half a ton. And the Eliminator, well, this SE version weighs in at 177 kilograms, which is pretty impressive in the context of the class. So bikes like the Honda Rebel 500, which I guess this will be fairly closely compared to, are over 190 kilos, and even something like the Royal Enfield Meteor 350, huge selling, hugely popular, and Kawasaki consider it a competitor as it sits in that mid-weight cruiser class. Even that is over 190 kilos fully fueled. So this less than 180, 177 I think, is far and away the lightest bike in its class. So again, for boosting confidence, especially at low speed and pushing it around, this is off to a good start. The rest of the chassis is fairly easy to understand. Up front you've got a set of right way up 41mm forks clutching an 18-inch cast wheel at the front, and at the back we've got twin shocks and a 16-inch wheel at the back. So some slightly odd figures there if you're used to standard street bikes, but it's all part of that Eliminator styling, or so we're told. Now when you're swinging about at speed, or what are we doing now, about 50 miles an hour, swinging around, the bike's actually kind of quite well behaved, quite easy to get on with. The front does feel quite a long way away, but it's not a bike that you're necessarily going to be pushing super hard. It's not something to worry too much about. In town you definitely can feel there's some extra mass at the front end. I guess that's a consequence of the front being so far away, so kicked out so far. And as for the rest of the bike, well, it's very simple to get on with. The switchgear's all familiar. The dash is a small round LCD panel with revs around the top, big digital speedo in the middle, gear position indicator, fuel gauge, trips, fuel range countdown, clock, all the kind of stuff you'd want. There's no other fancy stuff to try and get your head around. There's no riding modes, there's no traction control, there's no cruise control or any of that. It's a kind of a meat and potatoes bike. It's easy to get on, easy to ride, easy to get on with. Although the ride quality over some of those bumps isn't the most plush in the world. Now look, admittedly we're not hacking through these twisty roads like we might on something a bit sportier, but that isn't the point of the Eliminator. The job of this bike is to make life easy, and this is kind of easy, what should we call it? Let's call it bend swinging. I love a bit of gentle bend swinging from one side to the other. And what it does is it defies what it looks like on paper to be a excessively long, excessively low, excessively kicked out bike. This doesn't feel, watch out for the poor pooch, this doesn't feel like you're trying to wrestle a jellyfish into a matchbox. If that's not a phrase, then it should be. No, but some cruisers make even this kind of bend swinging hard work, and I've got almost no bar effort here. The Eliminator really is just gently cruising from side to side, going where I point it. It's not trying to sit up, it's not trying to fight my where I want to go, it's not trying to fight my handlebar inputs. It's all just very chilled. Yeah, I can do that, it says. I can cruise along this little twisty road, no dramas. Thank you very much. Eliminator might be a name that once terrorised 1980s drag strips, but in 2024, the Eliminator 500 is a completely different proposition. It's pretty much the total opposite of what that bike was 40 years ago. This is a bike that's all about being amenable and accessible and approachable, and it's a bike that completely delivers on all three of those promises. After a full day's ride around the south of Spain, I'd say the word I keep coming back to is easy. This is a bike that is easy to understand. It's aimed at first-time riders, shorter, smaller riders, less confident riders, less experienced riders, and it aims to make them feel happy and confident on a bike. This isn't about eliminating rivals from a drag strip. This is about eliminating fears and reasons why people don't want to ride bikes. It's easy physically to deal with because it's an incredibly low seat height to help you get your feet flat on the floor. It's incredibly light. It's lighter than the Honda Rebel 500 or the Royal Enfield Meteor 350, in fact, by a good 15 kilos. It's a slim tank. The ergonomics when you're on it aren't some cartoon cruiser caricature. It actually feels not too dissimilar. It's not that much further apart than from a regular naked street bike. You don't have to have your feet kicked out forwards and flapping in the breeze, or your arms up here somewhere. It's pretty intuitive to get on and ride. But most importantly, it is easy to ride as well. Everything from the smooth throttle response to the well-balanced engine to the unbelievably light clutch action and the positive slick shifting gearbox. I can't imagine how they could possibly make a motorbike that's easier to ride than this. Everything, the switch gear is totally obvious. Everything's where it should be. The clock at a glance, you can see everything you need to know. So that is everything that the Eliminator does well. It basically is a big two-wheeled welcome mat. In the interest of journalistic balance, we should probably pick a couple of things that the Eliminator doesn't do quite so well. For me, they probably boil down to two areas. The first is subjective. Let's say character. Now that's a broad topic, it covers a lot of ground. So I'll be specific about engine character. This 180 crank parallel twin is a kind of quite generic feeling engine. It doesn't reverberate with exotic, evocative exhaust note. It's very sort of timid and quiet, a very soft exhaust note. It isn't exactly radiating and overflowing with unique charm and distinctive charisma. But perhaps if you're a first-time rider, that's not so important. And in fact, the idea that it is quite a calm, considered, meek little motorcycle actually helps make it feel even more approachable. The second thing is the up-close detailing. Whether you like the overall look of the bike or not is completely up to you. I won't argue about that either way. But what I think is a fact is that this engine doesn't look like an engine that was really meant to be on display from day one. There's a lot of coolant hoses and wires and cables and brackets that just seem to be left out in the open. I've seen bikes that cost less than this that seem to manage to hide their guts a little bit more cleanly than this one does. But perhaps we're picking at hairs. The Eliminator lands in an increasingly popular middleweight cruiser market. Probably the two biggest other players in the market would be the Honda Rebel 500. Very, very similar proposition, similar sized engine. I think the two things the Eliminator has over the Rebel are a slightly lower price. I believe it's about £300 less expensive than the Honda, and considerably less weight. 177 kilos for this, 191 for the Rebel. This class overall is completely dominated by the Royal Enfield Meteor 350. For my money, this is so far removed from that bike, I don't think anybody really is going to be choosing between them. This has more than twice the power. It's £2,500 more expensive. Perhaps people might be choosing between this and some of the bigger 650 Royal Enfields, such as the Super Meteor or the Shotgun. And that would be interesting because they are a very different proposition. But let us know what you would choose. If you are looking at the Eliminator and considering bikes like the Rebel or any of the Enfields, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if I've completely failed to cover anything, and there's a very good chance I have, then please leave your questions below and I'll come back to them when I get a chance and try and provide you with some answers. All in all, I hope that's given you a bit of an overview of the Kawasaki Eliminator 500. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this, there's a like button down there with your finger on it. And if you want to know a bit more, you can go to BikeSocial.co.uk, where you can find a full written review of this bike in due course. I think that's all there is to say. Thank you very much for watching.